Hello, everyone. This is not a virtual podcast live stream like I'm used to be doing. As you can see, we're in a very beautiful office. And I've got an amazing guest today, someone that has an unconventional career, but is doing a lot of creative stuff, but dealing with a lot of logic as well. So my guest here can introduce himself in a bit. He's going to do a bit of a better job than me. However, Alfonso Monedero, head of BIM at Heatherwick Studios. Alfonso, how are you today? You okay?
I'm very good. I'm ready for this chat. I'm very excited. When you contact me, but would you be willing to have a conversation with me? Like, absolutely.
Well, you're more ready than me then, but I really appreciate it. So like we were talking before, first of all, tell the audience who you are.
So I'm a Spanish architect. I was trained in architecture. I was working in Spain, and then we had the architectural crisis, 2008. So just not doing much, just begging for a job. Nobody was giving me a job. So I had to move out of Spain. Going around the world. First I went to India. I went to South America for some years until I landed in the UK, 2015. And that's when I started with Heatherwick.
Wow, okay. So when you came here, first of all, 2015, I remember in the UK, we were starting to adopt BIM around 2012, 13, 14. Practices were thinking, we have to start implementing BIM. So at the time, was there many of these roles of BIM managers and coordinators? And did you think at the time you were going to go down this career route that you've come to now?
So when I came to the UK, I didn't even know BIM existed. So I knew Revit, I knew ArchiCAD, but I was looking at a position as a head of design because that was my position in South America.
Yeah.
I was 29, so that was completely unrealistic. And then I realized, you're not going to get a job to directing the design for any firm because you're just a young lad. So it was a recruiter, so that I had a Revit training. Like, well, everybody's looking for Revit guys. Do you want to do some Revit thing? Like, yeah, why not? They just need a job.
Yeah.
And that's where I landed here in Heatherwick to support them with their BIM deliverables. And I was the Revit expert, and I just had a course of 50 hours of Revit. And so that's how it started. They were implementing them in the office. They started in 2014.
Right.
But everything was outsourced, so they were starting to implement it. And I was one of the few guys that knowing Revit in the office.
Wow, okay. Having been there from the other side, I remember it too. I think if anyone had Revit on their CV and they knew it a bit, they would instantly become the office go-to. But it's been so over the years as well. So there's two sides which I find really interesting. So I'm sure the technology's changed. However, when you were starting to use it at the start, when we imagine Heatherwick, everyone in the audience, they know the cool projects and stuff. But we're talking about things that stretch the imagination, curves, things that you never even thought of. And when I was being taught of Revit in 2014 and I got my little certificate, I was practicing a little square house, and the families were all in the software. So how do you begin to do the super creative stuff within the limitations of the software? So at the time, was it a lot more difficult than now, perhaps?
It was more difficult in the sense that we didn't have the technology. There was just one method, is export from Rhino into SAT file, import the SAT. And usually this SAT file was 200, 300, 500 megabytes.
Yeah.
Just for a small piece of geometry. So the limitations was about the performance.
Yeah.
So you could do rectangular boxes, you can do skyscrapers, curved walls, but when it comes into the curvy things, we're just finding out how to do it.
Yeah.
So I remember one conversation when we were doing projects at the same time. Both of them looked similar.
Yeah.
Basically, they are the same with a different scale, but very similar. And in one project, we were doing the interiors and have the amazing idea of swapping the responsibilities for the other project. So the lessons learned was completely dumped. So we're doing this dragon skin roof, And we're thinking, how do we do it? I mean, we've never done this before. Do we start doing imports, SATs, adaptive components? We had no clue how to do it at that time. And we just learned by doing, by having mistakes, we do something, it looks terrible, do it in a different way, until we find that that workflow that was working for that project.
It kind of sounds in keeping where I imagine the experimentation of creative designers and architects, but it's also interesting there's from a technological point of view. It sounds like there's a bit of innovation as well there. Do you find that that's part of the process with you, or do you find that a lot of the time you're trying to put the logic and get the foundations right for the project as you go?
So one of the things, well, the most important thing we do in BIM in Heatherwick is we cannot put any limitations to designers. Okay. Because then we will be fired. I mean, it's not a box there. It's like, your Revit thing cannot do whatever we want, then we will not use Revit. And then we need to push the boundaries of it. So back in the days when we started, there was some really good people giving their plugins for free, and I can think about Mantis Frame. That was one of the first ones we were testing. Then we started using Flux, was using Grasshopper and Dynamo, and Flux was the middleman in between.
Yeah.
And we were finding out how to send information from Grasshopper to Dynamo. That was the only way back in those days.
Yeah.
But there were plenty of plugins. We were trying everything until we found the one that was fitting for our solution.
Yeah.
But back in those days, we're just behind the technological advancements. So just looking what was available and just trying to use whatever is in the market.
Yeah.
Back in those days, I was just a BIM technician, so it was just the Revit guy, not the BIM guy, So this is the design, just bring it into Revit and do the documentation.
Yeah. Wow. Autodesk should pay you guys for a bit of the research. I'm sure that you've helped influence their product along the way, right? On that theme, though, do you think then, because as your role, you mentioned you're the BIM technician, now you're head of BIM, you're doing all this cool stuff, right? But do you think that sometimes the innovation pushes the product? Or so do you have to kind of look for different ways to do it? Do you not limit yourself to one software? How do you even go about that from a strategic point of view?
So we have the design tools.
Yeah.
And that has been Rhino since the studio started doing architecture. Because that's the only software that gives the agility and the flexibility to just do as many options of single idea as you want. And then every single person that comes as a designer to the studio needs to know Rhino in a fluent way. And then we started using Revit because when we started engaging with clients like Google, they demanded it. If you want to work with us, you need to do a Revit deliverable. So that was the other side of the spectrum. Then how we started mixing them is like water and oil. It was kind of an art back in the days. Now it's very simple. Everybody can do it nowadays. There's tools that are available. But at the beginning, it was a bit difficult, I have to say. I remember it was Revit 16 when they put the import Rhino file as a native function. Everybody was super excited about that. And it didn't work. And obviously, it's just...
No, it's fair enough. I mean, the projects, they're super cool. And I could geek about the projects. However, it is also interesting, the journey you mentioned, because you said, listen, I was a competent Spanish architect, come in, and then I knew 50 hours of Revit, and I was the BIM person. And that's what it was like back then. However, you've progressed your career. You mentioned, you were the architect, and you're the BIM technician, and then you were BIM coordinator. I know we're putting labels on these, but back then there were no labels. But what I'm curious is, there's been a bit of an evolution there as well. Do you think, as you move through the stages of Revit technician, BIM coordinator, BIM manager, strategic, have you had to adjust and learn new things yourself along the way?
I mean, I keep learning nowadays. So if I reflect back of who I was 9 years ago when I first landed, Yeah, I was fast with Revit, but I didn't have the knowledge I have now. So
Yeah.
I was in Heatherwick as a BIM technician for a year and a half. I
Yeah.
deliver with them 3 full projects. I moved to Woodsbagger and I was the design technology manager. So in that
Right.
sense, I had to be viewing Rhino and Revit at the same time.
Yeah.
So I was getting a broader view of the scope. So it was not just the Revit guy, but I had also to
Yeah,
define the
yeah.
workflows to send from Rhino to Revit. And I was opening my mind into defining the workflows.
Yeah.
So when I came back to Heatherwick in 2018,
Yeah.
I knew the problem.
Yeah.
I knew what the solution might look like. And then I had to start learning coding because I was not a coding guy. I
Yeah,
knew
yeah.
how to do basic Dynamo scripts, basic Grasshopper scripts. But I had to learn Python.
Yeah.
So we got just a guy here, Thomas Mahon, to teach us how to
Oh,
do
cool.
Python.
Yeah.
We learned Python, and then we started doing our own internal tools about how to do Revit
Oh, cool.
and Rhino and connect
Yeah,
those.
you know Tom. I knew Tom. He's a friend outside. I often call him parametric Tom, but he would be really embarrassed that I say that. But that's cool as well. So it's a lot of it seems like as well, especially in the BIM community and parametric design. A lot of it's about sharing. Do you think that it's been? Is there like a community of people like yourself in the AEC group that try and help each other out, or did you find back in the day you were a lone wolf and no one knew what you were and it was hard to share that information?
So I think nowadays it's way easier.
Yeah.
So back in the days, we had a Dynamo user group,
Yeah.
and we were gathering every 2-3 months, showing some workflows. You have the opportunity to chat with these people were having the same kind of issues as you were having. I started attending conferences, and that was a game changer. So the first conference that I was attending, 2018, built.
Okay.
And I was going to the presentations by Radu or Don Mahon or Matt Jessic from Autodesk.
Yeah.
And they were showing how easy it can be to start doing C# and Python. Then
Yeah.
you get in on it, and it's not that easy, okay? But they were showing it was easy, so you get excited. At least you get excited.
Yeah.
And we started making our community inside that group of build, and I can mention that now I have a good relationship with the guys and BIG, Ersagonameron, OMA,
Yeah.
SOM, KPF, because
Yeah.
we have same problems. We have kind of the same ideas, but if we start sharing, we evolve together faster.
Yeah.
So
Fair enough. Aaron Perry was my BIM trainer back in the day now, and he's gone on to do great things. And sorry, Aaron, I'm not a very good student because I haven't done Revit anymore, and it was difficult at the time. But I find it so cool that you all know each other, and it's quite this, small but caring kind of community. I mean, the hashtag 2014 was hashtag BIM beers and all this stuff, and it seemed that the scene was on Twitter a lot. There was the Twitter scene of BIM. But has it changed much now? So you mentioned there's the meetups. So there's still these meetups that people can go to today, like the Dynamo meetup group and stuff.
So the Dynamo user group, it has changed and evolved into the design technology user group. It's still run by the same people, just because Dynamo is getting less and less attention nowadays.
Right. Really?
Yeah, because the
okay.
Dynamo people, they're also learning other things and they want to expand the scope. So it's just kind of the same environment, but now it's design technology.
Yeah.
That's open to anybody. It's first come, first serve. So we're meeting in 2 weeks, I believe.
Okay.
And so that's one of the options you have. You mentioned Aaron Perry. He made a group along with Ian Godwin, the UK digital design leaders.
Okay.
We're meeting every 3 months.
Oh, cool.
Aaron has recently moved to Konig, like yesterday he mentioned
I
that.
saw
So
that. Yeah. Good
I
for him.
won't be seeing him that often, but that community remains. So
Yeah.
we'll still meet every quarter or so.
Yeah. While we were speaking, because we've got this wealth of knowledge, and I love it. But what's quite interesting, is 'cause again, I keep going back to the fact that you were an architect, and
Yeah.
then you fell into this, and now you love it. But there's probably a lot of wisdom in there that maybe we can impart to the listeners or people who are thinking. Because often I get messages like, I'm thinking of a career in BIM. How do I do it, really? And I'm starting to see now as well some dedicated courses and degrees in BIM. Whereas when I don't think they existed when you were becoming an architect as well. So, I mean, do you have any advice for up and coming BIM enthusiasts these days on how to go about a career and follow in your footsteps per se? If you were giving advice to you 10 years ago, what would you say?
10 years ago. So I would say first, because one of my fears when I was starting to be labeled as the Revit guy
Yeah.
is we still do design. I mean, when we're doing a project, it's not the creative people and then the BIM guys. We're all part of the same team.
Yeah.
So I remember a quote when John Kennedy was becoming president of the US, and
Okay.
he was doing the space race against the USSR. So he visited NASA, and he was going around and asking, what's your job? So he was asking a janitor, what's your job here? He said, my job is to put the man on the moon.
Right.
So my job here at
Yeah.
Heatherwick is to make great projects happen.
Yes.
Even though I'm the Revit guy, I'm not going to start designing, but my job is to make those ideas become something real. So I still feel part that every project we do, I have a little bit of influence in those.
Nice.
So for somebody who starts into the BIM career, don't be afraid of getting out of the design part.
Yeah.
Because you will still be part of the design team, just in a different role.
Yeah.
So, and without you, maybe that project is going to be more difficult to become real.
Yeah. But that's it. That's inspiring. It sounds like as well, in that influence that you mentioned, you're working as part of a team, you're a team player, and the communication piece, because sometimes when we think of, again, there's this terrible misconception of the Revit guy, right? When actually we're talking about technology, which is enabling projects, as you say. But then it sounds like to me, then the communication piece is important. Is that something that you've had to learn over time, like how to work with architects? Because I'm sure you get some architects that are like, yes, bring on the tech. Some people are like, no way. And is it a learning piece like that, getting to know people and develop those skills in that area?
So I think for me, that was easy because I was on that side.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, before moving to the UK, I was the head of design.
Yeah.
So I was the guy just doing the renders and doing the Rhino models and doing a little bit of drawings, but that was a little part of my task.
Yeah.
So when I moved here, it's like, okay, these are me a couple of months ago. So I know how to speak to them. So I know that what they do matters. It's not just about hitting the deadline. It's about how we can hit the deadline with the best design possible.
Yeah.
So when I look for people in the market, for me, the key thing is that they value the design. It's not just, I need to produce 50 drawings. They need to be clear and the tags have to be readable and the dimension needs to be out of the wall. You're like, well, we need to push for the design to become as good as it can be with the time frame we have. Because when we bring into the studio somebody that has a different mentality and doesn't value that much the design part, she's going to have a clash with the design team.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to win it when you are in a creative space.
Yeah.
So when the motto that most is make spaces that bring joy and delight to people.
Yeah, makes sense. The more you talk about it, the more I can see your background in architecture really lends itself. So that's an interesting point as well, because maybe rather than just going straight into BIM, which you could do, but it sounds like actually having that base in architecture really helps with your job. Do you think without that, it would be much more difficult to lead and coordinate the BIM projects you do if you didn't have that background in architecture?
In a design firm, definitely. If you want just to be a BIM guy, you can do it in a project management, during the construction phase. You don't need any design appetite for that. You just need to get it built. Or you can be for a contractor, the BIM manager for a contractor. But if you're looking into how to coordinate BIM or manage the BIM or even strategic thinking, I would say you need to try different positions. You need to be a part too and get into a project and understand the process of the project. You need to be a design person for at least some months so that you have been on that side until you decide, okay, BIM is what I want to do for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then you can jump into this career. But if it's the first thing you do, I think you're missing the other side of the spectrum. So that duality, I think it's key.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And again, this could be really useful for anyone. So say now, let's pretend you need someone to join your team, as you do, because you can't do it alone. So how many people do you work with on your team at the moment? Do you have some BIM coordinators that work with you typically?
Yeah, so my team, it's kind of agile in the sense that grows and decreases with the workflow. But it's between 3 and 6. That's
cool.
kind of the size.
I
have
size.
a small team on purpose so that we are not the Revit for everything guys. So we have to delegate due to time constraints. And it's not just the design team is doing the crazy part, and then we have the production team. So by having a small team, we force them to engage into the production side. Because sometimes when you're drawing on 2D in Revit, you still need to think about how to solve something. If you need to have that back and forth about, I am just producing, you're designing, whenever you encounter that, you have to push back, have the decision, send it through with a sketch, with a hand drawing, with a DWG, whatever, and model it. And that's not very efficient. But going back to your question about when I look for somebody, I need that person that is fluent in Revit. That I would appreciate that they understand Rhino or they have worked in Rhino. It doesn't need to be completely fluent or the most agile person, but that understand why we do things in other software. And that has an appetite for design.
Cool. And it's interesting how it's changed from when you talked before about there was no one and you were by default the best suited person, and then you fall into love it. Whereas now it seems like there are a lot more people doing it, but it's also quite inspiring. So do you think equally then? So it sounds like, have you also seen the other scenario where maybe people weren't initially looking like yourself to be the BIM expert, but maybe they're an architectural assistant, then they do more and more BIM on a project, and then you go like, hey, have you thought about this? Does that kind of thing happen where people become BIM coordinators from within, or does it tend to be that you get people from external applying out of interest?
So that happened to me, and that happens to other people we have in-house, that the transition didn't happen inside the studio, but that transitions have happened for people that they didn't have any BIM coordinator expertise. They were just good in Revit, have some Rhino knowledge, and we get them in-house as the BIM guy. But that was the first time they were labeled as that. So that has happened. But I haven't seen anybody in the studio saying, well, my passion is doing Revit models.
Fair enough. Well, you can fall in love with certain things over time. So I was wondering one thing that maybe you can help me with, because within BIM, the other question that I get, because with architecture, you've got to get that beautiful CV, clean and crisp, and then you focus a lot on the portfolio. And especially imagine any architectural assistants coming here, they're going to bring their A game because, it's cool projects. how do you do a portfolio in BIM? Do you even need one? What's your advice for someone trying to construct a BIM career? Do they just need a good CV, or do you recommend that they do still work on a portfolio, but perhaps they show systems and logics? And
So the portfolio is very needed. I mean, you cannot distinguish like the right candidate for the less fit candidate just with a CV.
Wow.
With a portfolio, what we're looking for is complexity of the project. It could be a massive project and very simple, like you're doing Travelodge or Costco warehouses, or it can be a small project but very complicated. So I look at complexity of projects, the depth, so whether they have been doing Revit stage 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So that could be showing you how they can manage with drafting views, but also with model views, plan views, everything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be in the same project. So you can have one project showing complexity, another project showing technical.
Yeah.
And modeling skills, that's key when, everybody can do curtain walls, but when you encounter something complicated, how you start pushing the boundaries of Revit to achieve whatever you want. So those are kind of the 3 things that I look into a portfolio.
Okay, that's cool. I feel like I've been given some wrong advice, or even I'm learning here, because I think the portfolio is not needed so much, but actually it really is, because then you're seeing all this stuff. And the other cool thing from what you said is actually, because I think some people could be intimidated by the super cool projects here. You're like, but that doesn't matter per se. You're looking for the person that's handled that complicated project. So if it's not glamorous, but they're still good, you can see through that, right?
Yeah, complexity of the geometry could be in a piece of furniture. It doesn't need to be like urban scale. It could be very small, but challenging.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we just don't look into the previous practices that somebody has been working on. It's about the individual.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
I'm not the best at doing that, but I have some people in my team that are really good at looking at those spatial skills that we value.
Fair enough. Very, very cool. I was going to pick your brains on some stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. Because time we're recording this is 2024. And there's some cool stuff going on. And like AI is a bit of a buzzword, going to lose our jobs, all this stuff. I don't think about that, but from a tech point of view, right? Because I'm wondering, are you starting to see artificial intelligence and all this stuff starting to creep into what you do here? Or has it not really creeped in yet in terms of your department and your remit?
So we cannot neglect what is happening. So we need to open our minds of what is happening in the world. We try to be industry leaders in the sense that whatever kind of technology is coming, we need to test it and we need to implement if it's useful for us. And AI, it's so broad. It's like saying BIM. I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, of course.
So we are bringing AI in different spectrums.
Yeah.
So generative AI, everybody knows about Midjourney or DALI. So we have been implementing our own version of those with stable diffusion. So that's not directly into my department. It's more into the design part. But the key with AI in this spectrum is not to be controlled by the technology. So you have to control the technology. Otherwise, you're losing the touch.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, when people start posting things on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, I was going there and saying, Midjourney, DALI. So I could tell the tool they use to produce the image. And it was very obvious because they have very different fields. So we thought this is not good enough for us. I mean, if we do these, we're just going to be another firm. So we cannot go this route. So we started training our own models. And we have our own models that we ask for an image, it actually looks as a render that has been produced inside the studio. Maybe it doesn't have the quality for client presentations, but it's good to start a conversation.
Yeah.
So when we look into all the parts of AI that we can implement in the BIM side, we have done our own Revit Copilot.
Oh,
We have
cool.
implemented.
Oh, wow.
It's trained with our own standards, our own guidelines and workflows.
That's nice.
So then you can go into Revit. You have these. You remember Clippy in
Yeah,
Word
yeah.
back in the days?
Yeah, you can. What's your version of Clippy? It's going to be something else.
So yeah, so we have our version of Clippy inside Revit.
It could be BIM-ing. There you go.
Yeah.
You should take it before. Or I guess you can't have it. It's Heatherwick. So
Yeah, when I was presenting, like, this is my idea, we're gonna do it. It was the Revit icon with the eyes for the Clippy. It was so creepy.
oh, I love it. Do you know what? It's really interesting because I'm guilty of initially doing the most generic mid-journey things. You know, you put an image out, go, hey, it's so cool. But actually, initially, I thought the creativity stuff would be, well, I do AI. But in terms of my business, which is a bit different than an architecture practice. However, I use AI a lot for the mundane stuff, getting things going, trying to get rid of the repetitive tasks, you know. So sometimes I will ask my AI script to look at a bunch of data and bring me those values. And every now and then it will hallucinate. I'm like, why are you doing this? But I can really bizarrely see the value in that, the mundane stuff. I mean, I just like anecdotally how you feel about it as well. So the mid-journey is like, do you think that you can use AI to do more of that stuff as well? How do you feel about it? Like, do you feel positive about
I
that?
think I feel very positive.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot
Yeah,
ask
yeah.
something to AI and just take it as finished material.
No.
You have to treat it as your part one assistant. You know?
Yeah, that is such a good analogy on it. You need to still red pen the AI.
Yeah, you will not get the part one drawings and just sign it with your name, say, I've done this, man, because you will be in trouble.
Yeah.
So this is the same thing. You can go to ChatGPT, we use it a lot, ask for, okay, make me a Python script that is getting all the doors and tell me if they are mirrored or not. And you get the script, you need to correct it because you pasted in Dynamo in the Python and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But you have 80% of the work done. You just need to go and correct it, for example.
Yeah. That's fair enough. I've made the mistake of trusting it. I think a few times it works and you go, great. And then you look and you're like, oh gosh, why did I publish that without looking at it? Because I used to like it because personally I struggle with writing. Is because architects need to do lots of different things. And when it came to the dissertation, I think, and you will laugh because I actually did my dissertation on interactive virtual models around Revit, BIM, how, you know, the 3D game engines coming in. I went off on a tangent. And I think that in that way, AI helps focus these things. And, you know, it can help, but it can go off as well. Do you think then, so people get caught up in it losing jobs? I don't think that will happen. I think it's a tool. But do you think people need to be worried that AI is going to replace the BIM technician?
I think they should be worried if they're not embracing it. So AI is not going to replace you, but a person using AI will replace you.
Yes.
You're not using it.
Yeah.
So it's like people who neglect AutoCAD back in the days. Like, yeah, because I just keep doing things by hand. Well, you will be replaced by somebody using AutoCAD.
Yeah.
If they have the same skills, like creative skills, then we'll replace you because he will be faster.
Yeah.
Still, there's a niche for those people. They will not just go jobless, but the amount of positions that would be open for them would be reduced.
Yeah.
So it's the same. Don't fear it. Just adopt it and use it on your benefit.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're going to be behind the crowd. So you need to stand ahead of the crowd somehow. Some people specialized in BIM. Some people specialized in scripting and doing Grasshopper, or other people do visualizing.
Yeah.
So be different by doing something. And it could be AI. And I think that's the right way of doing it right now. Because once it's surrounding us, you cannot escape it.
Yeah. I was actually impressed, without going too much off on a tangent, with Claude AI at the moment, because I run a website, and unfortunately, you remember earlier you talked about sometimes in your role you'll get pulled into coding, and you're like, oh gosh, Wish you didn't have to, but it's actually a really good skill to do. But I found that I'm not an expert coder, but using AI as an assistant while coding is really helpful to learn. Do you think that AI could be used for more of that coding stuff, especially in architecture and design?
So I think it's used, and it can be used even more. But going back, you need to correct it. So it's the same. If you have a text in English and you want to translate it into French or Chinese, you're not going to send it saying, this is my French.
Okay, got
you
it,
need to know French or ask somebody who speaks French to correct it if it has made some mistakes.
Yeah.
So let's say you're doing a code in Python or C# or Java, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you put it, it's not working. It's not working. How do I fix it? Well, either you have some basic knowledge of that language, or it's going to be very tricky. So it's assisting you. It's doing 80% of the code, but then 20% of polishing. You need to know it. So I learned Python. I'm super rusty with that. So if I have to do something, it will take me for ages. But I can read. Okay, so you give me a Python script. I go through this. Okay, I understand what it's doing. And I can see some mistakes if it's not that complicated. So that's the kind of understanding that you need. And then you can use AI to assist you in that creating complicated things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I do that with web design. I can read CSS, PHP. If you asked me to do it from scratch, I couldn't. But I find that really, really valuable. So on that basis, would you still encourage people, especially in this sector, in your profession, people look up to you, would you say, hey, it is still a good skill to do, to learn a bit of this code, even if you're rustic, and it's still useful, right?
It's very useful, yeah. So if you're either into parametric design or you don't like to do repetitive tasks, so you need to automate things, and we can do from the design part just doing crazy geometry, or from the BIM side just putting tags on doors in 2,000 views. You don't want to go one by one. If you start learning even Python, which is way easier than C#, it can make a big difference. So you can go into Python and make a simple script and save you hours of mundane tasks that nobody enjoys. And then you can spend your time learning more Python, which is enriching, and teaching others so that you make this community. Because I remember when I came back to Heatherwick in 2018, I didn't know any coding. So I was staying after I finished 1 hour every single day learning. And it was after my job was finished, but it was worth it because it's just 1 hour every day. But the time you just go through a year, it's a lot of hours that you have been learning and you're putting into practice.
And that's a personal skill that you can use professionally wherever you are. That stays with you, isn't it?
Stays forever.
I think that's really important. And one of the questions kind of rounding off this to the end, do you have any feelings of where this industry's going, especially in terms of tech? Because I've seen I mentioned my poor dissertation, of like, oh, cool, 3D game engines. At the time, Twinmotion was just starting up. And now we're seeing a lot of real-time renders connecting with BIM and all this stuff. You've got Enscape, you've got all these cool tools, right, which didn't exist before. But where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years? Like, hey, if we look at this in 5 to 10 and we're not there, it's cool. But have you got any exciting thoughts about which way it's going?
So I like to think that in a positive way. So I start feeling that we will need less of specialists in just one software, but people knowing workflows. So how to get from A to B, from example in this office, from Rhino to Revit, and from any software into Twinmotion or Enscape or Unreal. You don't need to be the full expert in Unreal or in V-Ray or any software, but managing the workflows and being able to do more than just one thing. So when BIM started, you just needed the Revit guys, you needed the Rhino guys, and put them into the same room until they start talking to each other.
Yeah.
I see the value is about somebody that can wrap this up and define workflows, implement them, make them more efficient, and save hours. Because with AI, we see a lot of automation happening, and we don't need to go through the models and solving quick things. Hopefully in the next 3-4 years, that will be automatically done.
Yeah.
But we still need to produce the deliverables. So you need to start expanding the scope. So it's not just specialists in doing schedules.
Yeah.
Just going to a very silly example. But somebody that can get a project through the whole life cycle, and it's valuable in an early stage, stage 1, and also in a stage 4, and doing the whole project.
I think that's great advice. And any over careers is building up to that. It doesn't happen overnight as well, doesn't it? You know, I think everyone can get that. The last question I was going to say for me is, me and you, we were knocking around I mentioned I was getting trained up in Revit in 2014. Sorry, Aaron Berry again. Yeah, my BIM career's gone like this. Yours has gone like this, right? But imagine how people are coming into it now in 2024. Do you have any bits of advice for them? Imagine you were here with all you know. What would you do differently? Or what would you do the same?
So first, if I had my crystal ball when I was in university,
crystal ball allowed,
I would have learned Rhino and Revit when I was in university and ditch AutoCAD. So whenever I start saying, oh yeah, we can do things in 3D, we can cut it section, and the section is there. We got introduced to All Planned 2005. It was in German. I didn't speak German, so we were like, what the hell this icon means? But early embracement, and don't think that the technology can diminish your creativity. So you start embracing technology as early as possible. And don't stick to just one software. Learn 2, learn 3. One tool cannot do everything, because if you have one tool to do everything, it's not the best for anything. So you need the right tool for the right task. So do your design wherever you feel more confident. If it's a SketchUp, good for you. I don't recommend it, but good for you.
No sketch. Even I'm saying, sorry, SketchUp. Listen, if you want to sponsor this in the future, I'll remove it. But until then, no SketchUp models.
So you can go Maya, you can go Rhino, whatever you want.
Oh, yeah.
And documenting, the best documenting tool, whether you feel it's ArchAdemia or is Revit. We don't have a sponsor by ArchAdemia or Revit, so we can mention all of them.
We're it's a free zone.
It's agnostic, software agnostic, but documenting tool, design tool, visualizing tool. And with the 3 of them, you can learn. So don't stick I know Revit, it's done. I will have my career in Revit. Just don't stick to that.
I mean, and the last thing I'll say on that, I hear a talk before, I forget who the person was, but it really stuck with me. He said, always on the project, to get the outcome that they wanted, they would learn as much as the tools and the tech they needed. Then they got the outcome, they would leave it and go on to the next thing, not feeling, as you say, wedded to the software. It's like, I'm going to have to do coding for this, I'll do it. Okay, now I need to do Revit for this, I'll do it. Would you agree that's a good attitude to have in terms of the push your career forwards?
So the good thing about learning new tools is that it's easy to learn another one. So it's when you do languages, it's good that you learn the tool, but don't think that that's the end of it, because we don't know what will happen in 5 years' time. Maybe Autodesk is teaching Revit, and now we have everything in Forma, and my career is over because my software is not longer used. Many people transition from AutoCAD to Vectorworks, and then to Revit, and then to ArchiCAD, and then to Revit again. So it's that agility and that mentality that is not the end of the process until you retire.
Got it.
So nowadays it's Revit for most of the practices in UK. It can be something else in 3-4 years' time, and I really think that the landscape of tools should be broader and have the opportunity to choose whatever you prefer. and not have the monopoly we have right now.
Yeah. No,
It's-
well, it's quite exciting in that front, isn't it? Maybe if we could have the crystal ball, we'll see what happens when you look back at this in 10 years, if lots change. So maybe maybe the coding won't be rusty and you'll be keeping coding again. Who knows, right? Or maybe half of the role will be with your AI assistant BIM-ing. Who knows, right? They will be doing it. But no, at this point, I normally like to say to the guests, because I always feel it's unfair I get to ask the questions, and I like to geek off about BIM. You have to keep reining me in and all this stuff. However, do you have any questions for me? It could be about my previous career in BIM. Sorry again, Aaron Perry. It could be about today, because I do a lot of speaking to students and, they ask me questions about BIM. It could be about that. Do you have any questions about me or the Architecture of Social? Anything you'd like to ask at all?
How did you started Architecture Social?
Oh, it was a pandemic project.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and there's quite one or two cool tech stuff in it. So, because there was nothing to do, and I was furloughed from my job, and I'm a functioning workaholic, and I needed something to do. And so we set up the Architecture Social, and initially it was my idea of helping part ones and part twos get a job in a pandemic, because there was nothing around. Yeah. And it was initially a forum, and it was cool people coming, and I was flattered, like a BIM manager would come. I was like, oh my God, that's cool. Didn't think they'd come. That's amazing. Get a director, and all these cool people came. And then in there, you'll laugh, the podcast from this came because there were cool people in the forum, and I was like, I really want to keep it informal and just learn. Like when you're having a chat, a bit like us now, hopefully you felt we just talking a bit of wisdom, people can enjoy it, whatever, it's easy. But then during it, this is the bit you'll laugh at, and we actually did a BIM course. A little BIM course. I didn't. I got guests to come in, and it was all like, it wasn't like, hey, we polished and charged. It was for free. So it was totally open source. But with that, it was a bit, it was, we were rough around the edges, but it was really cool. And you'd have some people that would learn, and I learned some harsh lessons in that, You do an event, and we did one competition, and I was convinced it was like, there was this chap called Simon Murphy, I think, and he's a really nice guy. And he was really enthusiastic, and he made this competition, and basically it would teach people to do Revit, and there was all this cool stuff, and people had to build an extension to this house, and the best one would win the competition, and no one entered. No one entered. And then I learned from
competition.
that. Yeah, I learned from that. I was like, even the greatest idea in the world, sometimes the person's got to want to do it. Whereas then what I would do is, if I did a podcast episode and I said, these are the top 10 softwares you need to learn or you will get left behind. Everyone watches that, but the really valuable piece was not there. And then that's where I'm always constantly learning as well. And it's probably one thing because you've got to get people to buy into it. Some people are always attacked more, adverse initially. You can get them there in the end, and that's a few things I learned in the social. And so we still do stuff like that, but I definitely don't take sponsors. At one time, when I was very early on, I did have a company ask for me to promote them, and it didn't sit right with me, and it didn't turn out well, and in the end I would never do it again. And so I learned with that, my mantra now is keep it for free, keep all this stuff out there, we all learn, we all work it out together, but you have to be careful in that space, because with all the innovations, some companies disappear. You'll see like this amazing add-on and then it's gone. But yeah, the social started out like that, and I think I'm curious where, me and you being honest, where it will be in 2, 3, 4 years, because we're all changing in the industry, and how also we're digesting content is different. Like this will get more engagement than that beautiful competition. But this has been a good conversation as well. So,
yeah.
But who knows? And maybe, as you mentioned in your BIM software, where you've got your BIM assistant, that's probably the way people will engage with all your knowledge. You just don't know. So I think like the social will be there, but I think the method in which it changes is very different. And I see it as a series of logic with creativity. And I think the logic's there, but keeping it creative is quite challenging. So, sorry, I went on a roundabout.
Yeah.
But was that useful?
That was useful.
It
yeah.
keeps changing. It keeps changing. But I think AI will change it a lot. And the last thing I'll say, so on our website, thearchitecturesocial.com, I have a chatbot, okay? And the chatbot I've embedded, and you'll find this techie, because you've mentioned you've got your AI assistant.
Yeah.
So it's embedded in all the architecture social stuff. So I've trained it as well on them. However, even it's all focused every now and then, because I can see the conversations with other person's details and what they're looking for. And I will constantly, once a week, get someone go, draw me a house. And it doesn't work like that. You know? It's like, hey, so I think it's quite interesting to see what people want out of it. But you can't just make miracles.
They want shortcuts, and you cannot have shortcuts.
Yeah.
You can have somebody pushing in your back, but there is no shortcuts.
Design me a floor plan for my next house. It don't work like that. And I think that's quite a nice sentiment. Actually, you'll always need the architect and the BIM manager and the BIM
I
lead.
asked ChatGPT, how can I make a YouTube channel that makes $1 million per year? And it,
I'd love to know that one, but yeah, we'll.
I don't have the solution.
Don't worry, me and you both. But listen, thank you so much, Alfonso, for being here. I really appreciate it. Before you go, the last thing to the audience, if they want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to work with you, maybe they're an inspiring BIM enthusiast, technology enthusiast, like you say, where do they find you?
I think the easiest way is through LinkedIn. I'm open to everybody messaging me. So if you want to get in contact, just find me on LinkedIn, Alfonso Monedero. There's many that work in Heatherwick, so it would be fairly easy. And drop me a message.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience. And if you're a listener as well, I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to end the podcast here. Thank you, everyone. Take care.